Oh, thank you so much for watching the Linda Eastburn YouTube channel. We really appreciate your being here and would like to ask you to please subscribe to the channel. That helps us keep everything going and it doesn't cost you anything. It's a way you can contribute to the show overall. My guest today is Wayne Stapleton, and he has just come off of a very long tribute to Tom Kentrell, and I really appreciate your work on that, Wayne.
Thank you, Linda. It was the least any of us could do. I mean, it was just such an outpouring of emotion and love for the man that changed all of our lives, really.
Yeah, he was. It was. I was so privileged to get to interview him at one point, and regret not doing a second interview a little later on. But tell me, what were some of the things that were discussed on that tribute?
Oh my God, what wasn't? It just the the effects of that man on so many people worldwide. Um, and the passion that he had for the subject as far as what he knew these beings to be, you get into the what some people call the woo or the spiritual side versus the ape side, the missing link side. Tom was solidly on the woo, and in his early years, it would be a very rough discussion. But the older he got, the more love and compassion came through, and his desire of teaching people, helping people, loving people. And ultimately, that's what was so amazing with Tom was if you had the slightest interest in this subject, you could sit and talk for hours, and then by the time you got done, you felt like you were talking to one of your best friends.
Yeah, that was exactly how I felt when I did the interview. It was a short period of time talking with him, but just a wealth of information and such a revelation of what type of interaction and relationship one might be able to have with a Bigfoot.
Right. And actually, how easy it is. It's like in his later years when he got into his scooter, and I was the one that was driving him around to all the festivals and things, and we would just get on the subject and of people coming in and how do I see one? I've been in the woods for 30 years and I've never had an encounter. What's wrong? Why they don't exist? And Tom and I both would say just grab a chair, go sit down with your lunch, bucket of chicken, whatever, by a creek, by a little lake in the woods, out away, and just talk to the woods like you're talking to me here at the table at the festival, and tell them that you want to learn and you believe, and you want to learn, you want to see them, you want to understand the reality. And it might take a few times, but they will read you. And he would say, like your dog can tell the difference between the new neighbor is a good guy or a bad guy. They're 10 times more that. If you're sitting there and you're telling them you want to learn, but yet they read from you that you just want that $1 million photograph so that you can prove that they're real, they won't come around you. Uh, they can read your intentions, they can read your character. But that method of literally just going out and sitting is the easiest way to do it. You don't need to be hiking up and down, 6, 7, 8,000 feet, searching around and all of that.
Yeah, I think he had such an interesting introduction to them to begin with because he was in such a remote area working. And then
Hmm.
to have that gentleness of interaction that then later on developed into such a full-blown dialogue and almost like a teacher-student type of scenario.
That's exactly what it was. And in the end, they were there with us. We were sitting vigil I went in on it got to the point where I would go about every week because it's a 2 hour drive for me to Tom's, and I would go once a week to check in, and because I was doing all of his book orders for him, and I got there and it was obvious something had occurred, and I rallied the wagon, so to speak. Brought his granddaughter and her kids up from California and rallied the troops. Um, Tom didn't want that. He wanted to slip away quietly, but for some reason, my humanity got involved and said, no one would forgive me, and the pain and suffering would be worse if no one got to say goodbye. And so we had this huge rotating door visiting policy, which was wrong in the long run when I look at it. But we all got to sit with him, and as he would come in and out, he would tell us the stories of where he'd been, what was going on. Like when his granddaughter was at the airport and I was driving to get her. First of all, I'm very susceptible to mind speak myself. I've had it all my life from the age of 10. And but I was driving to the airport to get his granddaughter, and I was, obviously I was upset. Um, I was rushing, and Taranika, which is one of Tom's favorite contacts, this little redheaded female, obvious reasons, right? Comes to me and she says, "Calm yourself. Do not be afraid. When you return, we are with him." And that was so calming to know that the ones that closest to him were with him. Because when I left, I was like panicking that he was by himself with just the nurses checking on him every hour or so. So I get to the airport, I get Ashton, run back to the place, but I'm calmer now because she told me that, they were with them. And I'm trying to keep Ashton calm because it wasn't a pretty sight at first, and trying to get her prepared. And we get there, and his room lights are on, and it's like 11:30 at night, and we're like, "What's going on?" And Ashton says, "Is Grandpa standing up?" And I'm like, "No, there's no way." I said, "That's probably a nurse." I said, "Something's going on." Right in my head, I'm thinking, "Don't be surprised. Be surprised at what?" No, he's not. You're not naked him now, right? And anyway, we go inside, get in the room, and here's one of his favorite nurses standing there, and he's sitting up in bed talking. And I was like, "What the?" And anyway, so we get to him, and it was just like, "Hey, buddy, what's going on?" And the med tech left, and we are sitting there, and of course they had this, huge emotional greeting, and it calms down after a few minutes. And he said, "They have been asking me for days to go with them." He said, "But 10 minutes ago, Taranika come in and told me, wait a minute, they're coming." He said, "I didn't know what she meant. And here you are." So they gave him the strength, the ability of some minor consciousness for a while. It only lasted a couple of hours. But I went home 2 hours because Ashton was there with him, and I knew she would be like a mother to him. And she was. And he said, I called everybody, rallied the troops, and everyone gathered around him. And it was the next day. I think when he had his next, shall we say, trip, when he would drift away for hours and mumble and things in his, what we thought was his sleep, but it was more like a trance state. Really, it was his exhaustion. And when he came back, this time he had mentioned that Akanisha, which was his mentor that he had met in the blues years ago, was there. Taranika was there, and he said, and I kid you not, 750 others were surrounding the facility and in the facility, in the room with us, guarding and protecting him as he prepared to make his transition. And that went on for days, and we had incidences where the energy in that room was right, palpable. I mean, there was at one point there was a little desk lamp that was sitting on next to Tom that would start flickering out of nowhere. They had never done that before. It was a coincidence. I don't believe in coincidences. So Ashton started asking it questions. She started talking to it, and there was no hesitation. It was just like boop, 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 yes and no, and it boop, or no, or whatever. And it was her father. Her father was who had been dead for 35 years was using that lamp to communicate with her and her dad. And as we're all sitting there and we kept trying to trick it, like this has got to be, just ridiculous electrical stuff. But no, I mean, there was no, pauses, there was no randomness. It was just the most incredible thing I'd ever seen. And then Barbara Shoup, who was there that day, she had this entity come past her, and she could feel the energy and the change in the air, and it was a just complete dead calm room. I mean, there was no the heater wasn't on, the fan wasn't on, there was no windows open, and just in that calm dead air room, she had this breeze just whoosh right by her, and it was just stuff. It was stuff like that. Just like I said, all that energy and all of that. Those of us that can read and hear spiritual context and things, we knew that we weren't alone and that Tom was telling the truth, that they were there. We couldn't see them, but we sure as heck could feel them.
Wow, that must have been quite it's an
It's the most
emotional
incredible thing.
experience, but it's something to go through. It's like a process.
Yeah. And like I said, those that have are open and have the ability to somewhat communicate. I mean, everybody said, they could just feel it. At one point, we could even hear this slight humming. And in one of his moments when he came out of it, we asked Tom about it, if he could hear it or feel it, and he said it was them. He said they were singing him a lullaby, and some of us could pick up on it and hear it. It was just amazing. And then I had friends in the group or that I know outside the group, whatever, in various parts of the country, and they're like, I'm picking up on this feeling and the singing. What's going on? And I would tell them, and they're like, affirmation. That's okay. Now I know what's going on. And because they would just reach out to me out of nowhere, knowing Tom was sick, but they're feeling this, or they're hearing this, or they're seeing this. And I was like, well, actually, yeah, this is what's going on. And it was wild, just the distance and the amount of people that got involved. It was, as you can tell with my face, it was one of the most emotional things I've ever seen and been a part of. and then to relive it all last night for the first time. I mean, I just flat out lost it because I was Tom's or am Tom's executor, and so I was the one standing between him and chaos, and it wasn't easy, and it all came out last night, and I just looked like a blubbering idiot at one point.
Well, I
But
appreciate
anyway,
your willingness to share all of that and to let us kind of be part of that whole dramatic, process in his passing and all that people felt for him and um, received from him and just the awareness that was so present with him. It's an amazing experience that he had. And I don't know of anyone who could duplicate that or who has had that kind of depth to their experiences.
yeah, another podcaster or two has, when Tom was in the process, asked about, updates and could you come online and talk about it? And I asked Tom in one of his clear moments, and he says, "Yeah." He said, "But please wait." I said,
Mhm.
"Okay." And he says, "No matter what you tell him what's going on, you some people won't understand it until it actually happens to them. They experience it." He said, "But not to be a salesman. If you want to understand what's going on, read my books." I said, "You kidding me, Tom?" I said, "Come on, pops." He said, "No, just everything is in there. Everything I'm experiencing, everything I'm seeing, it's explained in all of my books that RS had me right. RS is Red Striper, which is his mentor, and a lot of it would be dictated by RS or thought planted, whatever you want to call it." And he says, "If people want to know about this experience, read my books." And that's when I had to agree to him. Well, again, that I will continue not as Tom, but as Tom. I will do the festivals. I've had experiences my entire life since I was 10. So I will take my experiences and all of Tom's presentations um, and Tom's books, and I will continue the path that Tom put me on. Uh, I went to him the first time in Medellin Falls in 21 after my partner George and I did Sasquatch on Hulu, and they wanted us to start doing festivals. Um, and Tom was the first person I met, and just like I said, the path that he has put me on. There'll never be another Tom,
No,
and
never.
he's changed so many lives with. It didn't matter how fantastical you felt your story was, how embarrassed you were to talk about it. He wanted to hear it. He made you understand what it actually was that you witnessed. And he made you feel that it was normal. And it was. Once you understand the spiritual realm, with through meditation and you just start communicating through that, through your heart, not your head, you understand. And that interactions between people that had the real curiosity, that's what made him special.
Absolutely, it did. And I'm sure he was a mentor to many people and has
Oh,
given
man.
insight to many people's relationships. But let's go back to you a little bit, Wayne. You mentioned that you'd had an experience at 10 years of age. Can you share that little bit of that with me?
Yeah, sure. I was, my father had been killed when I was 3 months old. My mother had remarried his best friend, childhood friend. They'd known each other since the age of 10 themselves. And I got to where I would spend the holidays at my stepdad's mother's cottage on a lake on the outskirts of Detroit, in what we used to call it like the Lakes District. And one evening, it was in January of 1974, there's what most men do in the middle of the night. And, I'm only 10, and I'm standing there doing my business. And I started this feeling of something was watching me. And it creeped me out because it's 2, 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm in the bathroom. And I know my grandmother's bedroom is on the other side of the cabin. And in a panic, I start heading to my bedroom, and in my head, something is telling me to check the window. And the closer I would get to my bedroom, the louder and faster that would get. Check the window, 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 check the window. And by the time I got to my doorway, it was like, oh God, there's the window. And the curiosity got me, and I got up and with one finger, just kind of, pulled it apart. And sure enough, in the corner of that window, like the window here on the screen there's this thing that's like this, and I can see the shoulder and the head and these two red eyes. And I just panicked. First and only time I've ever been scared around these beings. But I think looking back, it was really more shock. But I hit the floor and I screamed, and my grandmother come running in. What's the matter? What's the matter? And I almost couldn't speak. It was just like, bah! Pointing to the window. And she goes, what? And she rips the curtain open, and there's nothing there. And I told her what happened. And she said, oh, you had a nightmare. And she said, no, no. I said, no. And that actually kind of got me mad. And I was like, no, Grandma. I was like, I was just in the bathroom. I'm wide awake. This was not a nightmare. I was not in bed. I said, oh, just go to bed. Go to sleep. So I remember laying there in bed. And of course, after something like that, and where it happened is like, right there at the end of the bed by your feet. And it's like, how am I going to sleep with it? And I'm staring at this thing. And somewhere during the night, I remember passing out. And she came to me in the dream while I was asleep, trying to calm me down and telling me to visit her. And that's about all I can remember that. And I remember waking up, and my grandmother was a very brave lady. She was a lesbian in Michigan in the 70s, which was illegal. They lived openly. Her and her partner, I called her my Aunt Vivian. So I got out of bed, come out, and Grandma and Vivian were sitting at the table, reading the paper, drinking coffee. And I was like, oh, good morning, sleepyhead. And I just totally ignored them, just walked right past them, right to the side to the door, uh, grabbed my snowsuit because it was, like I said, January, early January, actually January 1st, 2nd. So I run outside. We had like 5 inches of snow on the ground. Run around the little cabin. It's like 30 feet square. And my bedroom was the middle window. It was the bathroom window, the middle bedroom, and then the front porch. And I come around the front house, around the edge, and look, and sure enough, coming across the empty lot from the forest, from the woods to the house was tracks. And then all up and down the side of the house were tracks. And at each of the three windows, you could tell where it was like it would stop and look around and, change footing, whatever. And then from my bedroom window, it shot back to a different direction. And it was like, whoa, okay. And it took me years um, to realize, you know, check the dimensions, the window. I didn't, I knew the feet were like three times the size of, my 10-year-old's feet. Um, but I would go back to that every summer. Like, I'd ride my 10 speed, 20 miles. Back in those days, you could do that as a kid. And I'd go out there spend the weekend and go fishing. And I fished at night because I love bullheads. They had a great fight to them, and which are just catfish. Anyhow, a certain type of catfish. So I'd be in that boat 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, and I would always look over to those woods that where I knew she ran in and out of. And every single day that I had done that, she would make contact because her little eyes would just go boop, and that's all I would see would be her eyes. I'd be in the middle of this 20-acre lake, and I could look over, and her eyes would just go boop, and I'd say hi. And that went on until I was 17. And because of Tom, I've been able to figure out who that is and why they were there. And that was just a couple months ago. But yeah, that's my first encounter, but first of many.
Well, that's quite an experience, quite an initiation into the whole Bigfoot phenomena for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I had never seen the Patterson-Gimlin film. I had no idea about any of it. But when this was in my bedroom window, it was like, whoa. And it took me years to figure out, like I said, Tom. Um, anyway, but yeah, Toby Johnson made that. I was doing an interview with Brett and Jill and Brett with Flash of Beauty and standing waiting for my turn. And I happened to look, and on the table right next to me was that face. And I about fell over. I was like, oh my God, I have not seen this face in 52 years. And there she is. But
When you talked about your conversations with Tom and how he helped you to understand what had happened to you, what advice or wisdom did Tom share with you that enabled you to have this greater understanding?
uh, well, it originally started with just, the stuff with the chair and talking. You know, it would all respect, no fear, then we talk. And that was basically his philosophy. That was RS's philosophy or his mentor. But it wasn't until I actually had a healing encounter with Tom, or because of Tom, that I got into meditation. And it was through that meditation that the communications opened up. But so if you look at the path, it was to Tom. You learn as much as you can from Tom. Like I said, all the respect and on and on and on. Oh, I'm losing track here. But
Well, you said you've met Tom at conferences, and that obviously led to a greater friendship and relationship of how you understood Bigfoot. But you had this
yeah,
healing encounter as well. So how did that come about?
well, as you know, Tom had been declining for quite a while. And this last summer, he wanted to go up into the Blue Mountains because Barb Shoop and the Shoop Troop that Tom had graciously decided I need to be a part of to grow with, to learn from. And he wanted to go one more time. but it was at such a high elevation and he was on oxygen and that, and we knew he couldn't stay there. So we drove out, we got a motel in town at the bottom of the mountain, and everyone had set camp up the day before, and we got there, we drove up. I see at this point I had upgraded my little car to an SUV, and I put a rack on the back so Tom could drive his scooter up on it, and I could strap it down, and we could drive wherever we needed to for all of his festivals and book fairs and so on and presentations. But anyway, he wanted to go back up to be with the family, his tribe, RS, Taranika, and everybody. And so we drove up. I got him set up. He had it. I gave him his oxygen, sitting there at the fire, and he talking the stories and talking, and then all of a sudden he got very solemn. He put his head down, and he's like, I asked him, I said, Tom, how's your O2 levels doing? He's like, he shook his head. I was like, what's going on? And he says, I'm out of air. I'm like, Tom, that tank was supposed to last a week. It's not even noon yet. What's going on? He says, I don't know. I said, so we panicked. I threw him in the car, ran down the mountain. Ultimately, we wound up driving all the way back to Enumclaw on almost no oxygen. And by the time we got back, he was white as a ghost, and his lips were blue, and he was gasping for air. And I got him inside, and all the med techs are just all over him and checking different things and that and the other. And I had got this intuition pull that I needed to go back up, but I wanted to stay there with Tom until I knew he was going to be okay. So I told Tom what I was feeling, and he pulls his oxygen mask down and he goes, RS says you have to go. You need to be up there. Someone wants to talk to you. He says, just go. I said, okay. I'll talk to you in a couple of days. I'll check in, whatever. And he said, okay, Pard. See you, bud. Left, got back in the car, and I took off. Well, we would go up and over 410 over Chinook Pass. And I'd been up there dozens of times, and I just love the mountains and the views. But I'd never really stopped to soak it all in and take pictures, and so I did. But the minute I stepped out of the car, and for the first time in my life, I got this massive attack of vertigo and this feeling that something didn't want me there. And it was so bad. I actually got to the point that I started rebuking it, like Pentecostal minister at church, kind of a thing. But as I'm standing there taking pictures, I'm standing against the guardrail looking back at the archway of Chinook Pass. It's a very pretty sight. But anyhow, I got this feeling that something was pushing on my shoulder, but I didn't really realize how badly it was because I was, focusing on what's in my lens and I was, balancing it around. And when I put the camera down, I realized I was like leaning over at almost a 45-degree angle. I was like, whoa. And again, I went to the rebuking and I got angry and I stood up and I was all wobbly and I got to the car and I says, you're not stopping me. I'm going. I need to go. I need to go. I got in the car, I got down. Anyway, got all the way back, told Barbara what was going on, and she was very concerned. She had said she had a feeling that something was wrong and not just Tom. And I told her what it was. She said, well, you're okay now, right? I said, yeah. I told her what I did. She said, okay. So anyway, so we sat there and the evening progressed and I said, I don't know. I need to be here. Something needs me to be here. And that evening, there was some chaos at the fire with people, and during the chaos, dogs and people and smoke in everybody's face, and just there was a lot going on. And as we're sitting there, I hear in my head instructions come to the other side, Yeah, because there was a cooling a shack or a little storage facility that was there, and just come to the other side, and I didn't even hesitate. Now I jump up and I shamble around because it's all of these compound slopes, and I had a very bad limp from a car accident years ago, and I get around to the other side where it had asked me, and it was just about getting to be dark, and I remember looking around, I'm scanning the tree line and everything, and I don't see anything. And I'm like, and I literally said out loud, okay, now what? Hello? You know, and all of a sudden in my head, close your eyes. And I was like, oh, here we go. And I closed my eyes. And I remember feeling that because of my imbalances and things from my car accident reconstruction of my leg, I was very unstable where I was standing. I was wobbly and the wind was swirling, and all of a sudden I noticed that the wind seemed to actually be slowing down, and then it stopped, and then in a split second it was blowing right straight in my face. But the way it started, it was cool, and then it went to this like ice off the lake, icy wind off the lake, cold right in my face, and then it started to warm up gently. And then it got to just like heat. And then it was open your eyes. And I'm kind of panicking, thinking, what is going to be right in front of me? I'm thinking, oh, there's going to be something there. I opened my eyes and was like, wait a minute, there's nothing here. But then it dawned on me that it wasn't the 30 seconds or the minute that it felt like, because the light had changed so much. I mean, the tree lines was different. It was much darker. And I started to look around. I guess I'm panning the tree line again, and I'm noticing on my left there was this root ball where a tree had fallen over, and you're looking at the bottom of the root ball. And behind it, there's like four trees, just little ones, 4 inches in diameter, maybe five, and they're sitting there. But I noticed that two of them aren't actually trees; they're dull, pulsating light sources. One was gray, very maybe the size of like a doorway in your house, and it would just gently do. And then next to that, there was like I said, or what I would say the third tree, and then next to that was a white one that was probably half again as tall, but it was white, and this one was moving slightly back and forth and in and out. And I was like, whoa, what am I looking at? And then I start getting this authoritative voice in my head drawing me up to my right, and it's up the hill. There's some structures there, but there's a stand of trees next to it that are 50 to 60 feet tall, maybe. And in the front, there was a couple of smaller ones that were about 20 footers, 15 to 20 footers. And right smack in the front, where the two of them are, there's another being. Only this one's the size of one of those 20-foot trees, and it was the color of freshly split wood. Um, just and I knew it wasn't a stump because all the stumps around there, everything was gray or black, and of course because of the lighting. But this wasn't. This was that bright color. And as soon as I looked at it, it was close your eyes. Actually, at first it told me when it had called my attention, it had come to me. So I started to move a little bit to it, and then I stopped, and it said, "Close your eyes." And so I did, and immediately my right hip was on fire with this nerve burning pain, and it started to radiate. And I was like, "That's my good hip. What's going on?" But anyway, that electrical tingle burn, it just started, and it spread all the way down to my knee, all the way up to my rib cage, and it wrapped around the front of me and around the back. And when it got to the point to where I thought I was going to have a problem, the left side started, and that was my bad leg because I had snapped my femur in half and shattered my knee, and I have a stainless steel bar that goes from my knee to my hip, and 11 screws in my knee, and then a screw every half inch through my femur all the way up and down. So anyway, so that side, it was like pressure. It was like somebody was taking a vice grip and just front to back and just squeezing. And same thing, knee to rib cage, front to back. And they had both at the same time going on. And it got so uncomfortable. I thought I was going to lose control and pass out. And I mean, it was like I got to tears. The pain was insane. And then all of a sudden, the wind kicked up again. And it all just faded away. And I said, Open your eyes." I opened my eyes and I looked around, and now it's completely black. I have no idea how long I was out there at that point. And I looked, and those three entities were still there. Only now they were like spotlights. It was like, whoosh. Look, sure enough, a gray one pulsating, the white one pulsating, and then that one wooden one from the color. And it was like the authoritative feeling. It was like I was in the presence of something big, not just physically big, but, you know, spiritually big, powerful. And it gave me a dressing down, so to speak, but I was not in nature enough. And I can't remember all the details now, but um, well, I was given instructions that I have to come back to that site, that specific, at least once a year, and I have to be out in the woods more often, and that other things would be other opportunities would present themselves. Well, I get back, I come down the slope, and I'm back in by the fireplace, the fire pit, and everyone is there. Barb Shoop, Lee Calvise, all of our friends were all sitting around, and they're like, "Oh, that was the only." She's. It said, "When asked, say I can't. No, I not right now. Not now." And I get to, like I say, back to the fire. And everybody's talking, and first thing, Barb's like, "Are you okay? Uh, what happened over there?" And then I get this poke in my rib. It's like, okay, I can't say right now. I don't know. I just need to absorb this. I don't know what happened. I just let me process this. And then she's like, okay, well, we're here if you need anything. I'm like, I know. I appreciate that. And it says, speaking of which, how long have I been gone? And then I think it was Lee who said, about 2.5 hours. And I'm like, you got to be kidding. So it felt like 5 minutes. And so we're sitting there and everyone's talking, and I'm numb, and I'm just woozy, and just, it was incredible. But several people left, and I wound up and I changed my seating position to where the woods was at my back. And I'm staring at the coals, and I'm just processing everything that had been going on. And they're talking about things, and all of a sudden I get to the point where I started talking, but it wasn't the normal conversation that we were having at the fire. I started talking about life drama, things that have happened in my family, and just I was like dumping. And Barb later called it purging. My children, problems with them and so on and so forth that had been major issues. Just purging and purging and purging and purging. And they all just sat there just amazed at what was going on and absorbing it all and just supporting me like a loving family. And the whole time that's going on, I'm hearing things in the woods behind me and I'm feeling things like there's something watching. And then at one point, I hear footsteps running between like a fire pit, and then there was a wall we had built with logs, and something ran behind that um, log pile. Anyway, so they at one point they all get up and they go off to bed, and my adrenaline is so high, so I'm just gonna sit here and I'll watch the coals until they die down, and then I'll go to bed. And it was like, well, if you need anything, my tent's here. I said, I know where everybody is. I'll be all right. But because I didn't have Tom, I was staying in the little cooling facility or guard shack or whatever the heck you want to call it, a little tiny building there. And because I didn't have any camping gear, because I had Tom and I had been staying in the motel with him. And I don't know how or when I got in there, but I woke up the next morning and I wasn't in the one of the beds, or I was on the couch and I was just in my underwear. And I was like, I don't sleep out here in my underwear. It's too cold. But in my head, I'm hearing, you know, get up. And so I spun myself around, and the first thing I noticed when my feet hit the floor was they weren't cockeyed, because when I had my reconstructive surgery on my leg, the one leg kicked out about 45 degrees instead of the regular, like 15 degrees or so, like we have normally. And I was like, that's strange. And then, again, as I'm marveling at my own bare feet, going, what the heck? I hear this walk across the floor in my head suggested. So I stood up, and the very first thing I noticed was the pressure points in my feet were completely different. Again, because of the reconstructive surgery and how it's imperfect, I had to shift to get, stand straight. And there was always this massive scar, pain, and pressure on my left thigh. And it was gone. And I'm just standing there going, what in the world? And again, walk across the floor. Okay. So I did. And I walked across the floor, and it was like my boom, boom, my heavy limp that I had was gone. And I just normal. And I'm going, and I got giddy and I got all excited and I got dressed and I go running outside, and Barb and Lee and Cindy and a bunch of other ones are already up having their morning coffee. And I go running over to the food tent. Well, first I said, hey, Barb, watch this. And I go running over to the food tent, and then I run from the food tent to the fire pit. And I was like, I said, what do you think? And she goes, you can walk without a limp. I was like, I know, right? And she goes, is that what happened last night? I said, evidently, yeah. So that was the miracle of what I needed to have happened.
I think
And
that's just a remarkable story, but also one that's inspirational for others that um, it wasn't even what you were there looking for. It was just a gift offered to you, it seems.
Yeah, it was. I mean, we had been told that spiritually there was something in the area and things were expected in a way because some that are open again, like I said, to the spiritual communications had been told that there was going to be some um, interesting things happening, and several things did. And then when it happened to me, it was that was totally out of the blue. No one expected that. And yeah, I was just there to had originally just been there to help Tom to be there for one more visit, one big last hurrah, one hi, goodbye, thank you kind of a thing. But again, something said I had to go back, and I found out why, and I will be forever grateful to that man because without him, I would not have been led to Barb. I would not have been led to all the other situations and what has happened in my life. And shortly after that, um, we were in Yakima, and Tom had done his so-called life story interview with Jill and Brett over at Flash of Beauty. And at the end, towards the end, he mentioned about, the respect and having your mind right and, his healings but you have to have the respect and on and on and on. And he says, ask Wayne. He had one about a month ago and, he rattled off a little thing about it. So when I took Tom to Yakima, Jill and Brett were there and they were like, what was Tom talking about? Could you tell us? And so I sat down and told them about it. And while I was like I said, that's where I found the face of what was in my window 52 years ago. And once that got published, a friend of mine had reached out to me. She's a medium, lives in Connecticut, Laura. And she was like, do you have any idea the talents that you have, but yet you don't have any abilities to understand what's going on? And I'm like, no, what are you talking about? So she's taught me meditation and grounding and rooting and the whole centering and clearing and um, introducing me to the stuff about intuition, your stuff, and just looking at back at the path and going from the documentary I did on Hulu, which led me to Tom, which led me to Barb, which led me to just on and on and on and on and on. And every step of the way, Tom's been there. Tom was a huge motivating factor in all of it. So I will forever be grateful for the teachings of that man, and so are thousands of other. I mean, look at the list of people that you've had on, Angelique, Sam Chandler, just on and on and on, all the people. And you can see them all how they all somehow go back to Tom.
Amazing how many lives he touched, but also amazing how many lives we all touch. So, respecting that
That's
and
right.
understanding that we're not an island.
No, 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 we're not. It's one big community, and the key to that community is respect.
I have to
If you can't have,
100%
yeah,
agree with you. Yes.
and if you don't have that respect, you are an island because you can't be part of the community without respect. And once you have that respect, your heart opens up and just the whole magnitude, the diversity of the universe is just right there. All you have to do is ask. All you have to do is look. But you have to have the respect.
Good words. Excellent, excellent interview, Wayne. I really appreciate you sharing your story with me. And I had no idea that we were going to talk about Tom, but it is just perfect.
Well, I didn't either, but my face is all puffed up and red from all the emotions last night, and I just wanted to kind of tell you that in case you were wondering, you look like you're tired, Wayne. You okay? So I'm glad you kind of steered it that direction. It was good. Thank you.
Well, I enjoyed hearing about it, and I'm sure other people will as well. So I appreciate it so very, very much. And take care. And I just hope your path continues being as meaningful to others as Tom was to yours.
I hope so as well, because I will be taking Tom's work, adding my own, and continuing forward. It's what he asked me to do, and it's what I will do as long as I can.
Thank you much.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thanks. Mhm.